Hi everyone, this is Gigi Weisenfeld. I am a research professor at NEAR, the National Institute for Early Education Research, housed at Rutgers University. And I wanted to thank you all for joining our Challenges and Solutions to Growing a Highly Qualified Pre-K Workforce Within Cities. We're going to begin by telling you a little bit about the logistics of the webinar. Heng, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks. Okay, so when we will have a Q&A session at the end, but when you do have a question or if you can't hear somebody or see somebody, you have a raise hand feature. So if you click to the speech bubble to open the chat box, right next to it will be a raise hand feature. And then if you can also type your question into the chat box and then hit enter to send it. You can select to talk to just the panelists or change it to all panelists and attendees so everyone sees your question.
Great, thanks, Heng. Several years, this is Gigi again. Several years ago, we began partnering with CityHealth. Together, we are co-sponsoring this webinar. CityHealth is an initiative of the Development Foundation and Kaiser Permanente. The group advances a package of evidence-based policy solutions that will help millions of people live longer, better lives in vibrant, prosperous communities. CityHealth regularly evaluates cities on the number and strength of their policies. For several years now, NEAR has been evaluating the 40 largest cities' pre-K policies. Next slide. 3 out of the 10 quality benchmarks, based on NEAR's State of Preschool Yearbook quality standards, are related to the qualifications of the pre-K workforce. In 2017 to 2018, about half of the pre-K programs that operated in the 40 largest cities required a BA for lead teachers, and less than a quarter required a CDA or equivalent for assistant teachers. On a positive note, about 85% of the cities required lead teachers to have specialization related to pre-K. Today's webinar, sponsored by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, discusses what cities are doing to create a pre-K workforce pipeline. And with that very quick and brief intro, I'm going to hand over the webinar to our colleague, Jennifer Brooks.
Okay, next slide. Thanks, Gigi. Hi, everybody. This is Jennifer Brooks. I am a consultant working with NEAR on the Pre-K for CityHealth initiative. And I'm pleased to say that we've got 4 remarkable presenters today who are going to talk about their own work in trying to develop a competent and qualified and well-paid workforce for their pre-K efforts in their cities and communities. So the presentations are going to start with Grace Reef, who is a founder of the Early Learning Policy Group, who will talk about her work with Mecklenburg County in North Carolina and what happened when a sort of big policy shift suddenly blew the need for workforce for a larger workforce in early childhood kind of wide open. So she'll tell us a little bit about that experience. Grace, as I said, is the founder of the Early Learning Policy Group. She was a senior policy advisor for 17 years in the U.S. Senate, working with Senators Miller, Daschle, and Dodd. She was the chief of policy and evaluation for NACRA, which is now Child Care Aware, and is now consulting deeply with Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. Following Grace, we're going to hear from Katherine Allred, who is the Director of Education Programs at the Central New Mexico Community College, who's going to talk about the work that she's doing in New Mexico. Central New Mexico Community College has the largest early childhood program in New Mexico. They're a national leader in Spanish language early childhood coursework. And Katherine and her colleagues run a statewide early childhood mentor network, and they do sort of all things workforce in New Mexico. And then we'll hear from Gail Joseph, who is the Bezos Family Foundation Distinguished Professor in Early Learning. She founded the Cultivate Learning and at the University of Washington. She has been a director of technical assistance centers for Head Start on inclusion and teaching and learning, and is the founding director of Early EdU, and will be talking to us about Early EdU and some of their work, particularly with cities. And then finally, we'll hear from Emmy List, who is the Chief of Staff at the Division of Early Childhood Education and Student Enrollment at the New York City Department of Education. In this role, Emmy oversees day-to-day operations, including their current initiatives to bring the city's early care and education services birth to 5 together in that department, which is pretty astounding and remarkable. So she'll talk to us some about what they've done in New York City to think about wages, which are of course kind of a key challenge when we think about the early childhood workforce. So with that, we are going to I'll turn it over to Grace. As I mentioned, or as you heard earlier, we will be taking questions at the end where you can send them in through the chat box if you want. And each presenter will be talking for about 10 minutes on their topic. So next slide, you can go to next slide. We're turning to Grace Reef. Take it away, Grace.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to join you today and talk about the work in Mecklenburg County, and of course, Charlotte is the big city there. We will be talking about MEC Pre-K, which is a new public pre-K program, which will be universal when fully implemented for all 4-year-olds. Next slide. So I want to give you just a little bit of context. It wasn't like somebody woke up and said, tomorrow we're going to have universal pre-K. In 2014, a nationwide study came out looking at the 50 top cities throughout the country. And Charlotte was ranked 50th. And that really spurred some thinking and action that really the people in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County wanted to do better. They didn't want to be 50th out of 50 on economic mobility, which basically meant if you're born poor, you got to stay poor. So they looked at what do we need to do? And a key area was identified as access to early childhood education. So from there, the county commission passed a resolution saying, let's take a look at birth to 5 access for early childhood education and where our gaps are and what we need to do. The Charlotte Executive Leadership Council, which is the CELC, it's a group of 24 CEOs in Charlotte, came together and put up some funding for an initial feasibility study. The county manager stepped in and formed a group of stakeholders, an early childhood executive advisory committee to work together. And that ranged from community colleges, 4-year college, Head Start, the Child Care Resource and Referral Agency, the public schools, everybody, commissioners, business leaders, everybody could come in. And at the end of a year, a study came out. And that had a 5-point plan of recommendations. The first was clear the child care subsidy waiting list for kids under 5. They had over 3,000 kids whose, parents are really struggling to figure out who's going to care for their kids while they work. The second was adopting a 6-year plan to implement universal public pre-K for 4-year-olds. The third, which was really the core of everything, was the workforce. How are we going to have this high quality workforce for childcare and to staff up universal pre-K? The fourth, embedded in all of this, had to be a strong evaluation strategy. We need to completely be transparent about these public investments that we were calling for. And the fifth was local financing. So the report came out, and very ambitious first year in June of 2018. The County Board of Commissioners voted to increase the property tax by 3/4 penny. In September, they opened 33 public pre-K classrooms, completely in child care centers. So this is a very high quality program that requires lead teachers to have a BA plus a birth to kindergarten teacher license, but it's entirely in child care centers. The second year, we just recently, this September, opened another 36 classrooms, so ambitious plan. And if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about what we're doing on workforce, since this is the cornerstone. So workforce is the key. And we knew that it's not just accessing pre-K, it's accessing high quality pre-K. And we were fortunate to have North Carolina pre-K as our model. It's a great program, it's showing great results. We talked to public pre-K program administrators throughout the country to get some lessons learned. We decided that we wanted to make CLASS, the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, all about teacher interactions, the core of our program. So that was an add-on. Otherwise, it's North Carolina Pre-K, but with CLASS. And we need to step up. You know, how would we do that? So we surveyed the North Carolina Pre-K lead teacher workforce. We wanted to understand who were they? What were their credentials? Where did they come from? You know, we found that they went to 26 different colleges. We found that, you know, nearly a quarter went to college outside of North Carolina. And we found that, you know, basically 2/3 were from HBCUs. So it was important for us to understand in the North Carolina Pre-K program, as well as Pre-K, you are either required to have that birth to kindergarten license or be in the process of getting it within 3 years. So we need to get teachers. One of the first things we did, frankly, was to reach out to Kathy Maines in Chicago and Katrin Allred and Elmar Garcia from the Central New Mexico Community College, because we knew a quarter of the kids in Charlotte come from homes where English is not the language spoken. They're Spanish, and we wanted to make sure we built a pathway for teachers who shared the culture and the language of the kids. We wanted to really have an impact. So that was helpful to inform our strategies. In fact, we have been able to expand the Charlotte Bilingual Preschool by 4 classrooms, which are now entirely pre-K, which is just the beginning. We need more, but just the beginning. On teacher recruitment, what did we do? We posted on Indeed, we posted at local colleges, we reached out to the HBCUs, but we also looked at the current workforce. What pathway could we support? How could we ensure that if you're in a childcare classroom now and you've got, you know, an AA, that you might be able to get the BA, and then you might be able to get the birth to kindergarten license. So we spent a lot of time looking at pathways, building pathways. On mixed delivery implementation, we knew from the get-go, we don't want to build this workforce and then have them go to the public schools. So what are we going to do on pay parity, compensation parity? And that was a big piece to us. So our program involves not just the credentials for teachers, but also monthly supplementals, $200 a month for health insurance, 3% of wages for retirement, up to $10 a month for life insurance. And then, as I said, the on-site coaching and TA. Next slide, please. So in addition to opening these classrooms and reaching out to staff them up, we also were fortunate to have a real public-private partnership with the Charlotte Executive Leadership Council, who put up $6 million specifically focused on the workforce to help bridge that gap between somebody who wants to get education and somebody who actually gets it. So what I mean by that is funding to go from an AA to a BA, funding to go from a BA to a birth to kindergarten license, and then funding for those with the BA to get their birth to kindergarten license. And it wasn't just tuition support. This funding from the CELC, we're just starting up now on this, is used for not just tuition, but also books and materials, transportation. And let's face it, half of these teachers have kids of their own. So we built in also childcare support. What we're hoping to do is really break down all the barriers so that if you're in the current workforce and we know we depend on you, we provide that pathway and it's attainable. Next slide. So these are a bunch of follow-up resources for you. You can take a look at it. I'm glad to answer any questions, but no, we are in the second year of universal public pre-K. We opened 33 classrooms last year, 36 additional classrooms this September. We now have 69 classrooms. And this is on top of about 150 or so classes that are school-based sponsored for pre-K that the community already had, and about 56 classrooms in North Carolina pre-K. So what we're looking at is more than 50% of the kids now have access to public pre-K in Mecklenburg County. Our goal is all families who have a 4-year-old who wish to enroll their child in public pre-K will have that opportunity, and they'll have a high quality program led by a high quality teacher. assistant teachers have to have an AA. So we are, working hard to make our program good and then plan over the next couple of years to be universal. And at the end, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Grace. Sorry, that was really helpful. And now we're going to hear from someone Grace said she turned to and who, in my own personal experience, has just had a remarkably deep, wide set of experiences in workforce, and virtually everything I've talked to her about, she's already tried. So I'm going to turn it from there to Katrin Allred, who's the Director of Education Programs at Central New Mexico Community College. Katrin?
Thank you so much. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the role that community colleges can play in supporting the workforce, and specifically some of the programs that we're doing here in New Mexico. And for me, one of the biggest issues is that we really have to lower the barriers and provide access to higher education by meeting early childhood educators where they are. And often that is in their workplace. And so it's crucial that we think about how employers and higher education are working together. Next. So I wanted to give you an overview of some of the state structures and programs that really lay the foundation for us being able to do this work. In New Mexico, we have a state articulation between all of the community colleges and universities that we offer the same early childhood coursework. And so what that does is students can transfer everything seamlessly from a 2-year program to a university program, but they can also transfer from institution to institution, which really does support a mobile population. The other thing that New Mexico did is it moved away from offering the CDA, which is often a training, to the Child Development Certificate. The Child Development Certificate is recognized by Head Start as equivalent to the CDA, but it incorporates 11 to 12 credit hours of the associate degree. So instead of having people start their career pathway through training, they actually start with access to higher education and getting that first certificate, which puts them a quarter of the way towards their associate degree. And when we're building these stacked certifications, we really have to think that way. So many people enter through the 45-hour course, which is a training, but we offer for credit here at CNM. It allows people the idea that, yes, I can be a student. We move on through the Child Development Certificate. The state has a 1-year vocational certificate, which includes all of the 100 and 200 level coursework. From there, there's the associate degree and a seamless transfer to a university. Next. So just to give you a little background about CNM programs, in 2018, 2019, we had 272 enrolled majors in the Child Development Certificate and 232 graduates. We have 857 declared majors in the associate degree in early childhood and had 91 graduates. This places us in the top 10 programs in the country in terms of graduates. And what's really exciting about that is about 50% of those students are Spanish language speakers. It was lovely of Grace to point out that we do offer our coursework in English and Spanish. And this came from the desire from the workforce that if we are having Spanish-speaking educators, they need access to higher education. We are also very much supported by our state scholarship, which offers free tuition, books, and fees to anyone working in the field of early childhood. And we really try and offer multiple modalities as far as when coursework is offered. Our classes start at 6 o'clock in the evening. They're on Saturdays, they're online. And a lot of what we do is outreach. We go to pre-K classrooms and talk to teachers. We go to centers during in-service and provide enrollment information on site. We're also working with our secondary partners to create dual credit pathways. We have 9 high schools that we work with that are offering early childhood or teacher education coursework in high school so that they already have a step into higher education. Another program that we're using to support the workforce is Crianza, the Early Childhood Business Accelerator. This supports home providers, specifically Spanish-speaking home providers, in the business skills that they need to run a business in early childhood. Next. I wanted to focus a little bit on our bilingual early childhood program to give you a sense of what it looks like. It starts as the Child Development Certificate, and it starts as a cohort. Students are required to take the Child Growth and Development course and an English as a second language class. And we've done this specifically to support people all the way through the associate degree and the bachelor's degree. Initially, we found by only offering coursework in Spanish, people weren't able to complete a degree because they needed that English. So building in the English support, and it's not just a typical ESL class, it's actually an ESL class for early childhood professionals. So they learn the English that they need in their career. After they complete the Child Development Certificate, they move on to the rest of the associate degree, and we encourage them to continue taking English so that they can meet those associate degree requirements. We've been working with our other partners across the institution, and now are offering math for teachers in Spanish, science for teachers, Spanish literature, and are continuing to expand those Spanish language coursework in general ed. We also offer this coursework online so that we're providing access to everyone across New Mexico. Next. And I think one of the important things for this webinar is our city partnership. So we are partnering with the City of Albuquerque and Youth Development, Inc., one of the biggest Head Start providers in the state, to provide a supported cohort for their employees. We started this about 3 terms ago, so next spring they will be finishing. And it initially started with the City of Albuquerque reaching out and saying, how can we get this workforce pipeline moving? We went to the educators and asked them, when do you want coursework? How do you want coursework? And they came back with, we want it on Saturdays. The city was able to provide childcare. We have a dedicated early childhood specialist that works with them specifically. And tuition, books, and fees were provided through the state of New Mexico. These cohort models, I believe, are essential to when you're looking at how you build your teacher pipeline and a strong workforce. You really need the employer supporting people as they move forward. Next. So the big things for me is, how are cities going to leverage their community colleges and higher education, and how can cohort models specifically support those workforce pipelines? They support it with student wraparound services. Peer encouragement is one of the biggest motivational factors that come out of a cohort model. And it helps us tailor coursework to be relevant to the workforce. If we know what you need, we can provide that. And one of my favorite aspects of cohort models is something that I call intrusive advising. It's the idea that we know who these students are so that we can wrap all of the support around them and encourage them to keep going. And of course, the idea of full funding. We know that tuition and books and fees are not always enough. So is it professional development time? Is it a professional development stipend? So those are some of the ways that the City of Albuquerque, YDI, and Central New Mexico Community College have been able to leverage that, supporting the workforce and hopefully moving them on towards their associate degrees. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Katrin. And we've already got one question flowing in, so I hope others will chime in as well, and we will turn to them at the end of the presenters. So now I'm going to get over to Gail Joseph, who is the founding director of the Early Edu Alliance and the Bezos Family Foundation Distinguished Professor in Early Learning at the University of Washington. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for the invitation to present our resources here. So it seems to me that cities or states, as they're thinking about their pre-K system, are always asking themselves a couple questions. So one is, how well prepared are our teachers, our current teachers, for meeting the demands of being a high quality pre-K teacher? And then also asking, as they expand to universal programs, will we have enough high quality teachers to meet the needs of our system? And so I'm happy today to present a free resource that might help city programs think about building a high quality teaching workforce. So I'm going to talk about the Early Edu Alliance. So next slide, please. And then you can hit the next couple too. Animation. So what is Early Edu? So Early Edu is an alliance of institutions of higher education and stakeholder members who are working together to improve child outcomes by supporting teacher development. And the way that we do that is we've had some federal funding from the Office of Head Start and some generous funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to develop complete, comprehensive, competency-based college courses that are available both in person, online, as well as some modules and some other resources. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what courses are available and what makes them maybe a little unique. So next slide, please. So this is a list of all of the courses. I think we have 16 listed here. We're up to as many as 18 now. And most of these are available for in-person and online use. And I just wanted to point out a couple that usually get some attention. So under the foundational courses, one of the courses we have developed and offer is Resiliency and Wellness for Educators. So we continue to hear reports about the early learning workforce as being a workforce that is stressed. It's a stressful job. And we know it's really difficult to have to support high quality interactions when we're feeling unwell ourselves. So that's an entire course that is about taking care of yourself. So learning some mindfulness-based stress reduction strategies, clarifying your values, thinking about finding support for yourself as you're both working as an educator and perhaps going back to school. So I just highlight that one because we offer it in our online program and we think that it's one of the keys to our high rates of retention and completion. On the practice-based side, I just wanted to highlight a couple. One is positive behavioral support for young children. We continue to see that as a big need in the field. And that course addresses essentially the Center for Social and Emotional Foundation for Early Learning's teaching pyramid, and also brings in the ideas around implicit bias and reducing suspension and disproportionate suspension and expulsion, which I know is a topic that most people are, I'm thankful, are paying attention to. But another course I wanted to highlight is down kind of towards the bottom, which is Engaging Interactions and Environments. That course was developed originally by our colleagues at University of Virginia, and it essentially is a course that teaches all of those teacher-child interactions that we see in the class assessment. So I know that Grace mentioned class as being one of the ways that they look at the quality of their pre-K programs. That's a course that actually helps teachers learn how to do those high-quality teacher-child interactions. And so I just wanted to highlight those courses. There's many others there. And now I want to say a little bit about what makes them unique. So next slide, please. So in addition to the courses being developed by leading experts and reflecting the latest science on how to optimize child development and learning, the other thing that we do is apply a certain pedagogy called the intentional teaching framework, originally written about by Bridget Hamry. And the way that we kind of distill this down is know, see, do, reflects, and improve. And so to say a little bit more about what that means is The know part is that we want teachers to know not only the theory, but we also want them to know the evidence-based practices that help support child outcomes. So the know part are essentially the mini lectures, the online lectures that provide that information, as well as lots and lots and lots of examples, video-based examples from real classrooms of teachers using those evidence-based practices. The C part is really not only seeing this in practice, which all of the courses offer a lot of video-based examples, but the C part is also about the helping a participating student hone their professional lens. So we want them to actually see, be reliable observers of the practice we're talking about. So if we talk about, say, print referencing as an example in the language and literacy course, we want to show teachers videos of teachers reading to young children and making sure that they're reliable observers, that they can observe every time print referencing happens, as just an example. And then once they are reliable observers, we actually have them look at their own practice. So when they take a course, they upload a baseline video. So we have them now look back at the time that they were reading with young children, they use print referencing as an example. And then based on that review and reflection, they come up with a goal of what they want to do next. So they enact that, that's the do part. So they actually try that practice out in either their service learning setting, if they're a pre-service teacher, or in their actual setting, if they're a current teacher that's going back to school to get their degree. And then they upload that video to a tool called the Coaching Companion. That is then shared with a community of reflection and practice. So some other teachers or other students that are taking that course too, they all give each other some feedback, and we actually give them feedback on their feedback. And then the instructor drops in and provides feedback, kind of a meta comment to the student about the extent to which they were using that evidence-based practice. So what we've done is we've actually transformed that college instructor into a job-embedded coach for them, because they are dropping in and providing feedback on that interaction. And then, as I mentioned, there's a lot of reflection that the student does each time they're uploading a video. They're reflecting on their own practice, and that all leads to improvement. So it's that intentional teaching framework that makes these courses really move the needle in terms of improving teacher-child interactions across domains. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in Early Edu, we have the Coaching Companion, which is video sharing and coaching feedback platform. And some community colleges and universities have actually taken the Coaching Companion and taken one of their current courses and just through the Coaching Companion created a competency-based course where they can do that video feedback. So they're not using our courses necessarily, but they're using the Coaching Companion with their courses, and that's also available for people. And then the other thing that we've developed is a multimedia library where we've taken videos of high quality pre-K programs from across the country and have tagged those and put those in a multimedia library that our members can search and use. So it might be that there's a coach, or it might be that there is a professor that wants to have more video clips to show what the evidence-based practice looks like. They can use the multimedia library for that. And next slide, please. And then I'll just tell you a few ideas for using Early Edu that have come from our members. So one is that by adopting the Early Edu courses, some people have improved articulation between community colleges and four-year colleges by using a common set of Early Edu courses and having them numbered the same. In some programs, they've really improved culturally sustaining practice by using cohort models, using our courses, and then using the Coaching Companion to have language-based conversations. So in one community college, they've taken some of our courses and they use the Coaching Companion, and in their community of reflection and practice, this teacher has put Spanish-speaking teachers together so they can share reflections and upload videos together. Some people have thought about using Early Edu and the Coaching Companion as an alternative certification route where they can have existing teachers take some of the online courses and use the Coaching Companion to do their teaching certificate. Some programs have used the like one or two courses to be an induction or compensatory education for elementary school teachers who might have a K-5 certificate but are now teaching in pre-K, so they need a little bit of information like the child development course or positive behavioral support course to help them really understand working with younger children. And then in some programs, they've thought about using it as an induction course for principals who will have early learning pre-K systems in their buildings. And then finally, we have a few models that are actually at the state level, but there's no reason why they couldn't be at the city level. There are different organizations that are all working on the professional development of early childhood educators have come together and aligned their efforts. So one example comes from Utah, where they actually take the courses, they put the online courses on their statewide learning management system, and anybody can take them. So all early childhood educators have access to the courses for free, but then they've made arrangements with a local college to, if some of those teachers want to earn college credit, they can enroll in the course and earn college credit for it, as well as getting that job embedded coaching from a college instructor. And all of that is at an incredible rate. I think it's like it's like $160 per student getting 5 credits. And now they've expanded that to even offering as many as 9 or 10 credits. So that's another example. And so thank you.
Thank you, Gail. So I can't say enough to folks on the call what a valuable resource Early Ed U is. I mean, I think everything from the videos to the ability to bring it into your own state and city higher ed system. So I hope folks are intrigued and we'll have questions to ask of Gail going forward. So now we're going to turn it to Emmy Liss to talk a little bit about what's been going on in New York City. I think we've all been kind of watching their pre-K movement with real interest, and there's of course a lot going on more than that. Emmy's the Chief of Staff in the Division of Early Childhood Education and Student Enrollment in New York City Department of Ed. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on this panel today, and I will try to speak briefly since I know I'm what stands between folks being able to ask their questions. So first I wanted to just start with a little bit of context. This may be familiar to some of you who have been watching New York City's expansion of pre-K for all, but really since 2014, the early childhood landscape in New York City has changed dramatically. With pre-K for all, which we began in 2014, the availability of free full-day pre-K for 4-year-olds has grown from what were about 19,000 seats to now nearly 70,000 seats for 4-year-olds, with programming available to every 4-year-old in the city who wants. In 2017, based on the research and evidence of the benefits of 2 years of high-quality preschool, the city began to expand services to 3-year-olds through our program that we call 3K for All, which is modeled very closely after what we do with our 4s in pre-K for All. We are expanding this program neighborhood by neighborhood, and we are currently in 12 of New York City's 32 geographic school districts, serving about 20,000 3-year-olds. Most recently, earlier this year, the city brought together all contracted care and education programs under the Department of Education. Previously in New York City, the means-tested programs that serve children from birth to 5 through Head Start and child care dollars were managed by a different city agency, the Administration for Children's Services. The city made the decision to move these programs together to provide a more seamless and consistent experience for children and families as they move through our care system beginning as young as 6 weeks through elementary school and beyond. This also allows us to provide a more seamless support system for the community-based organizations who serve children through Head Start, child care, 3K, and pre-K. Many of the organizations we work with previously held contracts with multiple city agencies and are now working with one set of folks here. So all in all, this now means that the New York City Department of Education is overseeing early care and education programs for about 100,000 children beginning at 6 weeks through 5 years old. You go to the next slide, please. And so how do we do this? Like in many other municipalities, early childhood education in New York is delivered through a mixed delivery model. This has allowed us to really leverage the decades of experience that CBOs have and the deep connections they have in their communities, particularly now that we're working with even more of our Head Start and child care organizations. The mixed delivery model is also just purely a necessity to serve a system at this scale, given the different constraints of all of our different neighborhoods, particularly those with more crowded public schools. So within our mixed delivery model, we have a couple different types of settings. Our public schools and pre-K centers are operated directly by the district. And in these programs, we serve only our universal 3K and pre-K children. Our center-based programs, these are our contracted CBOs. We work with over 1,000 CBOs in New York City who serve children in 3K, pre-K, through Head Start and child care, as well as some infants and toddlers through both early Head Start and child care. Many of these organizations hold multiple different types of contracts, sometimes even at the same site, allowing them to serve a mix of children through different funding streams, which is especially critical in neighborhoods where we have children who may be eligible for the extended day offered through Head Start and child care. And then finally, we work with about 1,600 home-based providers. These providers contract with networks who in turn contract with the city. Home-based care is the primary source of care for infants and toddlers in the city who are receiving subsidized care. It's also a critical source of care for many 3-year-olds. And we see family child care as the preferred form of care, particularly in some communities around the city. So next slide. Though we've worked to unify many of the policies across our setting types, there are some differences in teacher qualifications. This is in part tied to the health code that governs each of these different setting types. The staff in each of our settings are represented by different unions and hold different collective bargaining agreements, which also reinforces the differences that we see in teacher qualifications. For this slide and for the purpose of this discussion, I'm really going to focus on our lead teachers, particularly those who serve our 3- and 4-year-olds. In public schools and DOE-operated pre-K centers, lead teachers must be fully certified, so that's with a master's level certification. All teachers in our early childhood classrooms are represented by the United Federation of Teachers, the UFT, which is the union that represents public school teachers in New York, and our preschool teachers are on the same contract and pay scale as the K-12 teachers. In our community-based organizations, again, this is based on the health codes. The lead teacher in a 4-year-old classroom must either be certified or on a study plan and to pass the certification. Some teachers in our 3-year-old classrooms are certified, but it is not required. The representation kind of picture in our CBOs is not unified across the system. So about 1/3 of the teachers are represented in either the child care or Head Start local of District Council 37, which is part of AFSCME, and about 2/3 of the teachers in our community-based organizations are not represented. And then lastly, in family child care, the lead teacher certifications, lead teacher qualifications vary depending on the age of the child served. Our family child care teachers, many of them are actually organized by the UFT, though on a different contract than our public school teachers. Next slide. So one consequence of the mixed delivery structure with varied representation is that there has been historically an inequity in teacher salaries across settings. And again, the specific pain point for our providers that I want to highlight here is as it relates to salaries for lead teachers who are certified. Over the last 5 years since the expansion of pre-K began, the city has made moves to try and address this gap. We've done this in a couple different ways. First, by increasing salaries for CBO teachers through an agreement that began in 2016, and by implementing a program of bonuses for teachers who stayed at their site year over year. However, our CBO providers have seen greater turnover in their teaching staff than our public schools. Anecdotally, community-based organizations have shared that teachers who are on a study plan, which again is permitted in a CBO, would leave as soon as they became certified because their earning potential to public school was more significant. Next slide. This story has a positive twist, though. Within the last couple of months, we've seen really exciting progress in this longstanding challenge. So this summer, the mayor and city council speaker announced a significant new labor agreement for the organization representing child care teachers. This agreement has provided a pathway to pay parity for child care teachers with public school teachers by 2021. And it represents about a $17,000 increase in pay for these teachers, which we know will have a profound impact on their lives, on their families, and we believe it will have an impact on the long-term operational stability of our CBO providers. The local unions representing child care and Head Start teachers have both now ratified these agreements. And what's exciting, though I focused here on certified teachers, these agreements will also provide salary increases and other benefits to other staff members, including assistant teachers. As I noted earlier, we do have a significant number of teachers in our community-based organizations who are not represented, so there is still more work to do. And the city has said that the agreements reached with these labor unions will serve as the model for remaining certified early childhood teachers in New York City. On the next slide, I've just included a couple of links for those who are interested in learning more. The first is the city's press release just announcing the specifics of this deal, and then a couple of links to press articles since Chalkbeat has done quite a bit of coverage of this evolving issue in New York City and is a good resource if you're looking to learn more.
Thank you, Emmy, so much for this and for the links and the resources. And thanks to all of the presenters, I think, for providing some great examples of ways that some of the workforce issues have been tackled in your jurisdiction and some resources for the folks who have been listening. So we have a few questions that we're going to field. I'm going to start with a question from Mary Wolf for Emmy, since we just heard from her. And Mary asked what qualifications are needed to be certified in New York City.
Sure. So for our 4-year-old teachers, what I've been referring to is the New York State certification in early childhood education.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. So Mary, if there's more you want to know, just chat that in as well. The second question is from Carol Williamson for Gail. And the question is about how accessible your video uploads are for students who might not be computer literate or have the tools to get to those resources.
Sure, that's such a great question. So uploading the video is really easy now. So you can just do it by your phones, which most people have smartphones nowadays. So including those who might not feel computer literate. So they can just capture it on their phone, it compresses it for them and uploads it. But I think the bigger question is around, that we get a lot, is around the preparation of this workforce to be able to go back to school online. And we definitely have had teachers that have come to our online program who have never owned a computer before or even used a computer on a regular basis. So we've learned, now that was about 6 years ago, and maybe things have changed a lot since then. But what we do is we make sure to scaffold the use of the computer as well. So we do a lot of support at the beginning to orient students to how to use the technology. We help them figure out what browser to use, all of that stuff. And then by the time they've got 1 quarter under their belts, they are pretty great at it. In fact, they're starting to submit videos with like rolling credits and things like that. They get pretty fancy pretty quick.
Great, thank you, Gail. And the final question we have is also from Mary Wolf for Katrin about what the New Mexico CYFD Scholarship is and who funds that.
CYFD is our state agency where early childhood lives, the Child, Youth, and Family Department, until next year when we will actually have a Department of Early Learning and Education. But it is a state-funded scholarship, so it's a significant investment on the side of the state to support the workforce with tuition and fees and books.
Great, thank you. We have a few more minutes, so I would encourage anybody else who has a question to write in. I'd like to give each of the speakers a chance we sort of pushed them pretty hard on time, and they were remarkably responsive. So if any of the speakers have more that you wish you were able to cover, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I will create some questions myself.
Sure.
Which I have.
This is Grace. So, you know, I spoke about Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, and I will say I felt kind of compressed to stay within my time period, but I did jot down a few things I wish I had mentioned, like when we had this stakeholder committee, having all the people as different stakeholders come to the same table and communicate really resulted in things that were great for the community, like the community college and the four-year university, UNC Charlotte. Really, they redesigned the approach to how they could meet workforce needs. So previously, UNC Charlotte had not offered coursework for the birth to kindergarten license at night or on weekends. Well, how do you support the workforce if you don't provide a full range of, you know, options so that people can work and also go to school? And now they're doing that. The community college has done some amazing things in meeting the needs of the workforce. And I was going to talk about life navigators. So that's a position that's funded at the community college that works within the childcare community to really be a mentor, to tell people you can go back to school, you can succeed, and I'm here to help. And we were so impressed with Toria, who was the ECE recruiter for the community college, that in our plan we funded 2 additional ones, and one's bilingual. And they are both working within the community to kind of make it easier for people in the workforce to go back to either community college or UNC Charlotte at multiple levels. Maybe it's a CDA, maybe it's an AA, maybe it's a BA, maybe it's that birth to kindergarten license. And last, on the early ed U, I was laughing because that slide on the know, see, do, reflect, and improve, that is our model. That is totally what we're doing within public pre-K, in MEC pre-K, and it was great to see that slide. I'm thinking about how I can use it, but that totally reflects our approach.
That's great. Thank you for that, Grace. And I'm wondering if others want to chime in on this question of kind of coordination of different entities, and particularly I'm thinking about the issues of articulation for what you've talked about, Katrin and Gail.
Yeah, this is Katrin. We meet as an early childhood higher education task force at least 6 times a year in New Mexico, and that includes all of higher ed as well as the state agencies and other key stakeholders. And I really feel that that is a big part of holding that articulation together. And it really echoes what Grace was saying, is that you have to have the key stakeholders in the room to keep moving that forward. And I'd also like to chime in and just say that we partner with Early Ed U and are using the Coaching Companion and some of their coursework. And it's really helped us think how we can provide early childhood coursework, knowing that sometimes this is a workforce that isn't that comfortable with technology, to make sure that it's accessible to everyone. Here in New Mexico, we have very rural areas and our Native American populations on reservations. And so we really have to think about accessibility with low tech, and Early Ed U's done a great job of helping us get through that.
This is Gail. Thank you so much for that. A shout out around how you're using it. And we're completely inspired by how you're using it. And we hope that you keep sharing all the great ways that you've used the material. And for anyone that wants to, again, it was supported completely, the development by federal dollars and philanthropic dollars. So we're really hopeful that people will take it up and use it. Somebody asked the best first step to take if you want to work with Early Edu, and I would encourage you to go to the website, which is altogetherearlyedualliance.org, and you can explore everything that there is to that we offer, and then you can decide if you want to become a member. And the membership is free of charge. It just allows us to have a memorandum of understanding in place around the utilization of the courses. And then also our hope that anybody that uses them will provide us with some ongoing feedback.
Great. Emmy, is there any, I just want to give you one last chance if there's anything you wish you had said that we kept you from saying with our time limits, and then we'll move on.
No, unless there are any particular questions, I think I was able to quickly summarize what we've been through recently in New York City. All I would say is, I guess, just continue to keep an eye. I think just the sort of, because of the attention, I think that we've been able to draw towards the community-based organizations and really to the sector overall, early childhood. I think we've seen it benefit some of the teachers in the agreements that have been reached so far, and we're hopeful that it will continue to support the whole sector.
Great, thank you. And if we can just move to the next slide. So thank you, everyone. Again, I want to thank the presenters who've just been, I mean, they're remarkable resources for our community and also have been just a joy to put this webinar together with. So as noted here, the slides are going to be posted at cityhealth.org and near.org. And in the next few days is what we're shooting for. I know there was a question about the when. Although then I saw a slideshow and webinar will be sent by end of day. So it should be quite soon. And after this webinar, we're actually going to move to a second one that moves into questions about things like professional learning systems and how do you support the workforce you have through things like workshops, coaching. So everything we know on the professional development side of the workforce. So we hope that you'll join us for that. Thank you all again for joining us for this webinar, and I hope you found it useful, and best of luck to all of you in your work. I think we can end the webinar there.